Winter had just set in the town, bringing along its treacherous icy conditions. People were somewhat relaxed due to an incident involving a collapsed building on the other side of the city, where emergency services were expected to assist the victims. The medical worker's leg began swelling visibly before their eyes, and even without an X-ray, it was evident that there was a fracture. Beth promptly organized a new team to head to the scene. Her team, as always, comprised the necessary professionals: the invaluable Josie, adept at handling any type of road, and the focused Beth herself. When everyone was ready, they set off for the site of the incident. Even Josie, without argument, took her place in the back seat, realizing there was little time for discord and discussions with Gail in the cabin. Lately, Beth and Josie had a serious conversation outside of work. They were friendly, but at work, Beth always maintained her subordination. Now the doctor initiated a conversation, though not within the work context, about Gail's relationship with Josie. "Have you lost your heart, Josie? The whole station whispers that you're deeply taken with Gail, but it seems like you don't notice. You're beautiful on the outside, but something inside you isn't at peace. And the scar on your face. It's just an ornament like those men have," spoke Beth, touching on matters that affected Josie beyond the professional sphere. "Beth, what do you imply?" Josie pondered, trying to grasp the essence of her friend's words. "You say it as if he repels any touch, as if he's from another world. How should I interpret that?" The internal dialogue made her reflect. "They say he's in love, but it's probably just rumors, nonsense." Gail silently drove the car, while Josie sat beside him, studying his rugged profile. Thoughts flashed through her mind. "It's been so long since I've seen such a man with such a strong character." He attracted her with his appearance, promising protection and reliability, as if strength was embodied in every line of his. Avoiding closeness with Josie, Gail looked at her with secret tenderness, trying to conceal his feelings. He loved this girl too deeply to risk hurting her with unintended displays of his male interest. Every time Josie looked out the window, Gail instantly glanced at her again, relishing her modest but charming beauty. The nurse, returning to her initial position, found Gail already sitting upright, staring tensely at the road as if nothing had happened. Before the old building on the third floor, a crash sounded. A crowd of curious onlookers gathered around the house, loudly discussing what happened, resembling a swarm of buzzing bees, filling the air with rumors and anxious messages from rescuers, amplifying the alarm to the extreme. Rumors of the tragedy spread quickly, as if the wind carried news of a terrible disaster. Somewhere on the first floor, a girl was either choked or pinned down by a heavy object, her screams tearing through the air with piercing agony. Noble rescuers hurried around, their heroism paralyzed by the inaccessibility of the victim. Beth, with her graceful figure and impeccable resolve, immediately commanded Josie, instructing her to prepare the necessary syringe with pain relief. "I'll try to reach that poor girl," she declared, despite the warnings. Gail and Josie, turning at the sound of her words, shot her a glance filled with disapproval. "Don't do it, Beth. Absolutely not. Until the rescuers give the signal, the house could collapse any second," they cautioned, insisting on utmost caution. "It's time to act, not time to fear," the courageous woman resolutely replied. "There's a child in distress, scared and suffering. What's the point of our emergency services if they're as slow as a turtle?" With the syringe firmly held in her outstretched hand, Beth swiftly approached the building's wall, where firefighters in their shiny helmets and the emergency ministry's crew were already present. "Ma'am, where are you going?" "I'll try to get to the girl and administer a painkiller injection. I'm an emergency doctor. The passage is too narrow for any of our rescuers, but I'll try," she explained persistently, determinedly heading toward the injured girl. The wreckage of the collapsed building, the plaster-peeled walls with patches of blue, all came into view. Beth was forced to drop to her knees, crawling almost inch by inch forward. Her husband had always supported her in maintaining physical fitness, enabling her to overcome difficulties. At the end of the narrow passage, having traversed this agonizing crawl, she finally saw the girl. The child was pinned by a metal door from one of the apartments. Her little legs were trapped beneath a heavy rectangular slab, almost as if crushed, yet somehow oriented towards the exit, as if the child had tried to escape, but tragedy caught her off guard. Turning sharply back, she yelled loudly, "I can squeeze in here." Two men, lean-built, have pinned the girl with the door, but I'm already administering pain relief. "Stay calm, please, no shouting." There was a whisper in response. "Loud noises in such an old building can be dangerous," she cautioned, barely pushing the metal door into the apartment, struggling but determinedly pushing it forward. The soft rustling behind her accompanied the woman's whisper. "The girl is calmed by the injection. Drag her out by her legs. I'll keep pushing the door back." The men, striving with all their might, pulled the girl more energetically toward the exit of the narrow passage. The return path no longer seemed as mysterious and insurmountable. Beth paused just for a moment on the street, and people didn't see what happened next. The building began to crack and collapse before their eyes like a house of cards. Only two young individuals managed to escape from under the falling walls, carrying the girl with them. The debris of the building forever consumed the serene and always quick-thinking Nurse Josie and the renowned emergency pediatrician Beth. They ended up buried under the rubble. Josie screamed hysterically and rushed towards Gail, who had already managed to grab her, holding her like a little girl. Both felt as though some greedy monster had swallowed their colleague, consuming their own vulnerability. Wide open, this monstrous image with chunks of stones attracted Beth, who boldly stepped inside with her syringe, as if swallowed by a toothy mouth but not suffocating. People were running around in chaos. Someone said that something unknown happened with another four tenants. The team dedicated to Beth stood amidst this chaos, tightly embracing each other. Later they were told that their presence was no longer needed, and they headed to their car, still embracing each other. They had to go to Kai's place to deliver the sad news to him and little Aurora. 2 weeks passed, and now Gail and Josie had a new boss, a pediatrician from the city's children's clinic. The men, usually known for their silence and some sternness, now seemed as if they had lost something significant, as if not only had one of their team members departed, but something much more meaningful, a piece of their souls. Work went on as usual, but now the inner drive to accomplish things had vanished, as if it had dried up and withered away. That day, when they lost sight of Beth, became a moment when their ordinary routine was disrupted. Hastily heading towards Beth's house, they discovered Aurora was at daycare while Kai packed his training bag. Josie's eyes vividly reflected an incredible intensity of emotions upon hearing the sad news. After they recounted what had happened in the final moments before Beth's departure, Kai's face froze momentarily, pale with horror. His eyes, initially radiating bright light and vivacity like fire, then dulled as if a fading torch, and his skin took on an ashen gray hue, exuding silent sorrow and the heavy burden that had descended upon his shoulders. In such a moment of profound sorrow and heavy loss, when words seem insufficient, it is important to show empathy and support through presence and care. Josie and Gail realized they were as if stranded in the center of a scorched desert, where extra words seemed hollow and out of place, and all that was needed was to be there for each other. They did not wish to part, as if an invisible yet strong bond tied them together. After the dreadful and hopeless tragedy, they arrived together at Josie's apartment, both feeling that words had become redundant in explaining how much time had been lost. Josie prepared food, as if she had done it many times before with Gail. After the stress they had been through, both had voracious appetites, and a large skillet of fried potatoes generously sprinkled with eggs was devoured in just 5 minutes, becoming stolen moments for bonding and understanding each other without words. Previously, Gail had a sense that if Josie were close by, he would lose his self-control and rush towards her like a famished wolf. But reality turned out differently. Instead, a feeling of tenderness towards this woman ignited in his heart, gently melting inside him like ice cream on a hot day. Gail experienced a semblance of happiness that convinced him all those agonizing moments of waiting were swept into the past, especially when Josie fell into a troubled sleep. He worried about not giving her peace. He periodically checked if she was sleeping on his shoulder, and at that moment, he understood she was his woman, his dream, the embodiment of his deepest desires. Gail was struck by the warmth with which Josie touched his scarred face, gently kissing the curved line, gazing into his eyes. he felt the pleasantness of her tender affection. This moment brought him back to the revulsion he once felt on his wife's face on the day he returned from the hot zone with his wounds. Everything had already been said in their history, and now they were simply proving to each other that everything that had happened wasn't a mistake. They understood that it took patience and waiting for such an event to occur. The next morning, Josie calmly said, "Gail, maybe you could swing by your house, pick up things for the meantime. My apartment and job are closer and more spacious. Then we can decide what to do with your place. Perhaps we could combine our efforts and exchange our properties for something more spacious and convenient for both of us." Gail hadn't realized before what a blessing it was to be in a peaceful haven with a family. For years with his spouse, they endured irreconcilable separations, and there was always an odd emptiness, a coldness in the house, even when they were together. This sense of unfamiliarity made him escape to work, seeking refuge from the elusive emotional distance. Everything changed with Josie. Suddenly, there was a sense of confidence, significance, and belonging. Even when he went to the store for groceries at her request, she managed to miss him and welcomed him warmly, as if he had returned from a long journey. After the tragic loss of Beth, Kai lived in a semi-conscious state. Mechanically, he prepared breakfast daily, made porridge for Aurora's breakfast, the little girl who became his pillar and sole source of light. In his free time, he couldn't stand the narrow walls of the small apartment, which became unbearably cramped after the tragedy. Both sets of parents, his and hers, changed, turning into helpless elderly people consumed by grief. Both families, having lost their loved ones, tried to find solace in working the land. They passionately engaged in gardening and horticulture, attempting to shelter themselves from pain and sorrow. Even their granddaughter couldn't entertain them, asking too many questions in a short time. On weekends, Kai would take his daughter on spontaneous trips. They would travel far, pitch a tent by the river, and gather wildflowers to adorn Beth's grave. On their way back, they always made a stop at the cemetery. Kai would sit on a wooden bench and continue lengthy conversations with his departed beloved wife, sharing how their week had gone as if she were still with him. Sometimes he proudly recounted how his charges had won prestigious competitions again. Beth was depicted in photographs, her smile always bringing joy to Kai. Her life motto always resonated clearly: "We are responsible for all that we engage in. Be kind and persevere until you achieve victory." After visiting the grave, Kai experienced fleeting relief. He noticed a new trait within himself. He was irritated by cheerful, carefree women on the streets. Encountering such lively, joyous ladies, he watched them with anger, pondering. "I wonder, darling, could you boldly step under the rubble of a building where a stranger's child cries in despair?" A dark shadow of annoyance surrounded him. Why did everyone else continue their lives while his beloved had gone forever? Aurora suddenly matured significantly. Even at her young age, she had acquired a kind of wisdom akin to an old soul. After her days at daycare, she was never capricious. Buckwheat porridge with sausages became the best dinner. And every time she listened to the tale of Cinderella before sleep, it felt like the first time. She didn't feel fear when left alone at home if Kai had to suddenly leave. Upon his return, she always caring inquired, "Are you tired? Shall I make some tea? Let me take the dirty socks to the bathroom." She had already lost her second mother, yet Aurora never asked questions like, "When will Mom come back?" or "Why are we living just the two of us?" They felt comfortable even in this desolate state, always mutually understanding each other. Occasionally, Gail would drop by with pastries or cake, and during those moments, they held cheerful tea parties, mixing joy and longing when reminiscing about Beth. All four of them missed this wonderful woman immensely. At times, Kai was tormented by the desire to leave this city far behind, where every corner reminded him of a happy past. But he couldn't detach himself from reality, even on the anniversary of Beth's death. They decided to commemorate the occasion at a cafe, former colleagues of the courageous doctor. Everyone organized it themselves. Kai's parents brought Aurora to the venue, and everyone was ready. Gail and Josie had recently married, unwilling to further postpone formalizing their relationship. Their family was expecting an addition in a few months. They had recently moved to a new apartment, having purchased it with funds from the sale of their previous solitary corners. At the memorial table, many warm words were spoken in memory of Beth. No one was ready to part quickly this time, not even Kai's parents, who expressed the desire to take the girl with them for a couple of days, genuinely missing little Aurora. Seeing off the last guests, Kai headed home through the park where they had once met. On the same bench in the shade of an aging chestnut tree, on those same paths with bushes and flowers concealing from prying eyes, a group of young people was noisily spending time in a distant corner of the walkway. 3 of them surrounded a girl, not letting her retreat. For a moment, darkness clouded Kai's eyes. The victim of the young guys was like an exact copy of his Beth, occasionally preserving her youth. The delicate girl with hair cascading over her shoulders stood helplessly between the burly guys, clutching an elegant purse in her hands. The guys encircled her more tightly, wearing predatory smiles. Kai quickened his pace. "Hey guys, maybe the lady just doesn't want your company," Kai spoke calmly but firmly. One of the young men eased the pressure slightly, turned his head, and retorted, "Sir, it's better for you to walk away. We'll handle it with our friend ourselves, we don't need anyone's interference." A shiver of anger ran through Kai's body, swiftly escalating into furious rage. It was important for him to save this young girl, not to let these troublemakers harass her, even if they were well acquainted. "It seems you don't understand that this is none of your business. Leave here, passerby. We're all good here." "You're the extra one," declared one of the guys. Kai briefly glanced at the girl with green eyes, conveying desperation. She was silent, but her eyes pleaded for help. Kai understood she felt uncomfortable in this unpleasant situation. "The girl will leave with me," he said, presenting an ultimatum to the guys. "Or you'll regret meeting me today." "Look at this genius." One of the trio detached himself from his friends, commented another guy, moving closer to Kai. "He doesn't understand our words, cocky guy." "Hey guys, haven't you considered that the girl doesn't want to interact with you?" he remarked. One of the young men loosened his grip slightly, turned his head, and whispered, "Man, it's better for you to walk away. We'll handle this lady ourselves without any interference." A chilling shiver of rage shot through Kai's body, swiftly transforming into a fiery volcano of irritation. It was crucial for him to protect this young girl, not allow these brazen guys to harass her, even if they were well acquainted. "It seems our witty friend misunderstood us. Walk away, passerby, we got this." "And you're extra," said one of the guys with a smirk on his face. Kai quickly glanced at the girl with emerald eyes, seemingly engulfed in despair. She was silent, but her gaze pleaded for help. Kai couldn't be mistaken, the girl was clearly suffering because of the unfolding unpleasant scene. "The girl will leave with me," he reiterated an ultimatum to the guys. "Otherwise, you'll regret meeting me on your path." "Look at this funny guy. One of the trio separated himself from friends and is trying to stir something up here," said another guy. Abruptly, one of the guys reached into his pocket and pulled out a small knife, which glinted in the night lamp's rays. "How about this noble knight decided to save the honor of a completely unknown lady?" the guy proclaimed. "You choose. Either I tickle your throat with this toy, or we find out if our beauty enjoys such amusements." Kai, a regular visitor to allies renting a martial arts hall at their school for training, had never felt fear before. However, when an alarming scene of a fight unfolded before him, Kai felt an urgent need for action. In these fading moments, he realized that they shouldn't touch her replica, a replica of what needed to be preserved in that moment. Memories of their first dates flashed before his eyes, but now these images merged with the chaos of the unpredictable situation. The guys surrounding him made a unified movement towards the victim, but she froze in place, like a statue surrounded by assailants. Kai was irritated by this situation. Tonight, he had only had a couple of shots of vodka, but the rest was fueled by his hatred for the types who considered themselves the masters of this park and felt entitled to do whatever they pleased with someone like Bet. Though only 10 years older, he felt almost like a peer of their generation. His opponent's gaze reflected cruelty and a desire for lawlessness, and their actions conveyed an unrestrained yearning for total freedom beyond what was considered acceptable. The collision began with sharpness and ruthlessness. The youth wielding the knife inflicted a serious cut on his opponent's shoulder, provoking and inviting a more serious struggle. The strongest of the three attackers, smiling, locked eyes with Kai, seeking to psychologically undermine him at the onset of the confrontation. The girl, standing on the sidelines, opened her mouth, but it was unclear whether out of fear or confusion. "Get out of here," Kai shouted to her. "So that you won't become a spirit here in a second." However, the girl wouldn't give up. "I won't leave you alone with them. They've been harassing me for a while. And now, they caught me alone without my friends, and it's late. We all study at the university, boys from the elite Golden Youth, and I'm from an orphanage." Her words seemed to step on some kind of pain. Kai was deeply distracted by the girl's monologue and missed several powerful blows to his ribs. Something crunched inside, and he felt it was a fracture. The guy with the knife, wanting to diversify his actions, ran up behind the girl, pressed the blade to her cheek, and the metallic glint reflected. "Didn't you say, my darling, that you're not used to abandoning your own? What if I tickle your throat a little bit now? Will you listen to me across the entire park?" The girl, previously stunned by the events, didn't lose her composure and turned to the guy. A thin line of blood trickled down her cheek due to his actions. "You people at the university are so tiresome, you empty creatures. Without your parents, you're nothing, just emptiness, zero without a stick. But what can you do on your own in this life? Take away your expensive car, all your trinkets, your bank card. What do you know about surviving in the wild pack of teenagers?" None of those present at the fight expected such resistance from the attractive student. The guys became completely frenzied, their faces contorted with furious rage. But the girl was not about to give up. When one of the attackers, removing the knife from the girl's throat, joined his friends, they surrounded Kay from all sides, forming a grim mass of bodies and faces twisted with malice. Kay himself couldn't later recall if he pushed the alleged leader in the chest. But the guy did something like a gymnastic somersault, lifting his legs off the ground, and fell backward, hitting his head on the hard curb separating the alley. A spot of emerald thick blood instantly appeared under the young man's head. Kay, usually the one directing his friends to the infirmary in case of injuries, instantly sensed the seriousness of the situation. Checking the pulse of the opponent by placing a finger on his neck, he found none. Subsequent events seemed blurry to him. The girl was the first to regain composure and called for an ambulance and the police, strongly urging everyone to stay at the scene. The guys began to fuss anxiously, making calls to various services, their parents and acquaintances. Kay vaguely felt the weight of responsibility, sitting on the curb next to the guy. His mind was filled with thoughts of Aurora, his 5-year-old daughter left with her grandparents. He glanced at the young student with unmistakable determination. "I'm sorry, what's your name? I'll need your help. I'm Kay. Here's a note with my address, keys to my apartment, the phone number of my friends Gail and Josie. My daughter is with relatives now, please pick her up and pass her to my friends. They'll take care of her." The police, ambulance, and a crowd of people arrived at the scene. Kay, remarkably calm, observed all the commotion. He couldn't help but notice the anxiety around. The police quickly ushered him away from there, protecting him from potential danger, especially considering that the men involved in the fight, including the son of a high-ranking official, seethed with rage and indignation. He felt fortunate to avoid serious consequences right at the scene. Sarah always stayed close to Kay, the one who saved her from the ruthless attacks of the criminals. She even provided the medical team with information about the cut on her neck to obtain a report about the incident later on. Continuously, she provided updates to the police operatives. All of them were taken to the police station together, filled with anger and outrage. He was immediately inspected, all documents and his mobile phone were taken from him, while he was engaged in conversation with the police officers. Sarah quickly stepped aside and made several phone calls. Then, locking eyes with Kay, she showed him a thumbs-up gesture, indicating that the mechanism for caring for his daughter was in place. It turned out that Sarah had an amazing sense for desperate actions, always being at the center of all events. In court, she described everything so vividly that the relatives of the wealthy and successful participants of the fight paled from the candidness. She found witnesses who confirmed that the trio of Golden Youth had long been harassing and humiliating her at the university, where she was respected but not favored by this group of fellow students. For the victimized side, the situation wasn't developing in the most favorable manner. Kay didn't want to harm the boys who were just starting their lives. It was too severe a response even for his explosive character. Everything had already been set in motion, as it was. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in a general regime colony for exceeding the limits of self-defense. Sarah's active participation greatly helped the judge find the optimal solution for him. Sarah insisted on an 8-year imprisonment and tried to shift the trial in another direction, but her efforts proved futile. The judge ultimately adhered to the initial decision. Kai didn't know how Gail and Josie managed to negotiate with the guardianship authorities, but his daughter Aurora was placed under their care for the duration of his imprisonment. During this time, their family welcomed Luca with rosy cheeks. The medical team in the city provided assistance regardless of social status, often saving not only the children of ordinary citizens, but also those of important officials. When Josie got permission for a visit with Kai, she reassured him. "Don't worry, my friend. Aurora will be fine with us. To us, you and Beth are not strangers. I'll gladly and regularly update you on her life. As soon as we're allowed, Gail and I will come visit you. You're serving your sentence in the neighboring region, so it's not that far. But what about your daughter?" Sarah visits Aurora regularly, bringing her toys and treats. She even wants to take the girl from daycare to stroll in the park or go to the movie premiere with her. Who would have thought she'd become such a devoted friend? Meeting Sarah occurred under unusual circumstances. With the same determination as during the investigation, she stood up for Kai in court. Her resolute behavior seemed remarkable considering her young age. "Kai, you're naive when it comes to relationships with the opposite sex. She seems to have fallen for you at first sight. You're a true defender, a gentleman with good looks. Don't underestimate the girl. She finished university after technical college. She's already 23, and the age gap between you is only 9 years. She looks younger due to her dwarfism and fragility. Just take a closer look at her. Beth won't come back. Both of you have a lot of good ahead. You both deserve it," Josie comforted him with her words. The escort accompanying the prisoner after the meeting with the young woman felt bewildered seeing a smile on Kai's face all the way to the cell. He was perplexed, wondering if happiness could still be promised in his future space. Perhaps, in his life after serving his sentence, something different awaited him than he had thought. Relationships come in different forms. Some exchange their feelings for trivial material possessions, while others remain chosen ones for many years, fearless and without reproach. It depends on each individual and their unique destiny. Thank you very much for watching. What do you think about this story? Write in the comments and subscribe to the channel to not miss the upcoming videos released daily.